C'est comment, Jérémy?
Là, on va visiter Treinta, l'une des startups d'Amérique du Sud avec la plus forte croissance. Je les avais rencontrés il y a 1 an et depuis, ils ont levé une série A de plus de 46 millions. Et donc là, on arrive dans leur bureau, dans le centre de Bogota. Vous allez voir, l'open space est assez magnifique. Today I'm super happy to have Lluís, the CEO of Treinta. I have a first question for you, Lluís. How many companies are using Treinta today in Latin America?
We have 5 million users across 18 countries in just under 2 years since launch. So it has truly been an amazing journey.
Yeah, we will come back to the Treinta journey after that. Before, we'll go back in the time. So when did you move to Colombia? Because you are originally from Madrid, right?
I'm from Barcelona.
Barcelona, sorry.
Yeah, both me and my co-founder
Okay.
are from Barcelona originally. All of our life spent there in Spain. We became consultants.
Yeah.
We were fortunate that in our respective consulting jobs, we did some work in LATAM, both
Okay.
of us, that we were already friends from university. And we really fell in love with the culture here, the opportunities. So I really moved when we started Treinta.
Okay, so you got the idea before with your teammate from university, you know very well. So you already have the co-founders.
Yeah.
And then you get this idea by working on LATAM to say there is a big problem. And
That's right, yeah, exactly. I actually moved the 3rd month since starting Treinta because it was in the middle of the pandemic. You couldn't fly to Colombia.
Yeah.
My co-founder was already living here because he moved in his consulting job. He changed his office. But yeah, it was basically a new adventure all around.
And to come back on the idea, because it's very different, and we will deep dive into the economy in emerging market like Colombia and country like Spain. How did you identify this problem or this idea? It was mainly by seeing opportunities in other localizations around the world. It was maybe by seeing the problem. How did you find this idea of this big problem of Treinta?
Right. So partly it was seeing things that were happening in other sides of the world, particularly Southeast Asia and India, and the problem by itself, which is most micro merchants in LATAM are not digitized at all, the vast majority. It's a problem that it's very apparent for everyone that lives here. Although maybe if you are local from Colombia or from another country in LATAM, maybe you think that this is the status quo and it's close to impossible for these type of people to change the way that they operate their businesses. But for me, it was shocking. Coming from Europe, you don't really see any type of business these days that doesn't accept card payments, that does bookkeeping in pen and paper. So for me, it was shocking. And I saw this as a top-down opportunity that this is not sustainable in the long run, and that eventually there would be an entrepreneur that does something that digitizes these businesses.
Yeah, for sure. And what's the biggest challenge you have to build a company, not in your hometown country or city? What are the big challenge and recommendation you can give to entrepreneurs who want to build company abroad? What are the 3 or 4 big challenges you see?
I think, first of all, I feel fortunate that Latin America, its culture, it's not that different to Spain. There are definitely many differences, and there are some cultural shocks. And if you go to downtown Bogota, it's very different to downtown Barcelona or Madrid. Yet the way people interact, the social norms, sometimes I say that it's in many ways closer Spain to Colombia than Spain to France. Even though being in Barcelona, having grown up in Barcelona, we're 100-something kilometers away. But I really feel that way. But it's true, looking back, that hiring the first few people, not having a strong network in the country, it makes it a bit more difficult. initially.
Because it's difficult, for example, when in your country you know the good university, you know the good startup who train well the people, but when you arrived in Colombia, you didn't know where to look for the first talent, right?
Exactly. You didn't know where to look for. It's very hard to get referrals. It's very hard to get recommendations. But this has changed now, obviously. With more than 250 people, we have people that have worked in the best startups, come from best universities. So this is only a problem in the very early stage.
Okay, so at the end, the problem is almost the same all around the world, is to build a team. Whatever, if you are in your own country or if you are abroad, the biggest challenge is to build the team, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I also think that knowledge about the market is not that relevant, because I think we people tend to have a bias thinking that they know a lot about their about the place where they grew up in. But I don't know a lot about small businesses in Spain. Really, I know much more about small businesses in LATAM because I have proactively learned and investigated about what they do.
No, it's super nice. And to focus on the problem, it may be difficult for some people, but most of the people who travel to, I will say, South Asia, Africa, or LATAM, when you go to the downtown, you are impressed by the number of businesses there is. It's impressive. Like every street, there is thousands of businesses. And can you explain me a little bit more, like how important they are in the economy of Colombia and what the importance they have on the economy?
So it's truly amazing, and for me it was shocking the first time I came to Latin America, because in Europe or in the Western world, it seems like most businesses are dominated by SMEs that maybe have 2-3 chains, have 10, 20 people, and in this middle layer of in terms of size. While here it's true that almost every establishment that you would see across any street of any town of every country in the region is a micro merchant, and most of them are operated by a single person. It generates around a third of the economy, and there are between 50 and 70 million of small businesses.
Only in Colombia?
No, in
Latin America.
Latin America.
Okay.
And they generate over half of the employment. So it's really a big part of the economy. So I think it does drive the future of Latin America.
Yes, it's only like 1-2 business, but whatever the industry, it can be like in the retails, like services, all the type of company are represented in this micro business, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would say, like, especially retail. Retail is probably the most prominent one, at least the ones that we focus on.
Yeah.
We do have also many of them in the primary sector, agriculture and stuff like that. But they really dominate every single aspect.
And everyone is talking about digital transformation.
Yeah.
It's becoming, and you have been a consultant, so I think you have been in the center of this big world.
Yeah.
But I have the feeling like the perfect definition of digital transformation is what you are doing on a day-to-day. Can you explain me more of like your definition of digital transformation and what is happening for micro businesses in Latin America?
Sure. So I also used to think that digital transformation is a big word that I wasn't sure of the definition. But for us, it's very simple. We have this very large group of the population, which are basically sole proprietors and micro merchants, that they used to do everything offline. They used to do bookkeeping in a pen and paper. They used to order products from their suppliers by not even calling. Once a person from its distributor comes by with a printed out catalog, and they just make the order face to face. Payments are entirely cash, etc., etc. Every part of their daily life is completely analog, and it's extremely clear now that if they adopt digital solutions, they will improve. They will improve in efficiency. They will have more information for better decision making. They will get better prices, etc., etc., etc. So it's allowing them to use digital tools to become more efficient.
And I think they sleep better at night because yeah, it's impressive when you go, for example, in a small like shops to buy clothes and you see like behind the front desk, you know, like the big book, the big paper and with the pen, and you can see like everything is on a book, like the real definition of bookkeeping is in a proper
Right.
book. And what are like the main problems? So you mentioned like the bookkeeping, you mentioned the stocks. What are like the key problems they face to not be digitalized?
So it's cultural mostly. We had identified these problems a couple of years before starting Treinta. We had me and my co-founder had this idea in the back of our minds, but it was when the pandemic started that we decided to launch this because we thought it would be a catalyst for change where habits were changing, there was economic pressure, etc. But it's mostly cultural. It's resistance to change, lack of tools until fairly recently, and I guess like there's a part of not knowing what the benefits are until they really try it out.
And do you see a change as well in the population? Because we can expect, like I will say a little cliche, that most of these independent retail are like old person. Do you have like the average age, or do you see like a gap, you know, for example, in the farming industry in Europe, where most of the people are retiring now and most of the farmers are becoming very young? Do you see also a trend on the economy in the small businesses?
So we know that in Colombia, the average age is around 40, a bit over 40, like 42 or 43 years old. In our user base, it's younger. It's like 10 years younger, the average. So it's obvious that it's much easier to digitize the younger group of people. Actually, a big percentage of our user base, around 25%, has a business of under a year of age, which with the rotation that exists in the micro merchant industry, on average, one business closes every 5 years, so 20% close every year. So there's a big rotation. The new ones that are coming up are much more likely to be digitized. We still find challenges with the 50, 60-year-old that has managed the same business for 30 years, and they are just operating it the same way they have done it always, and their parents maybe as well. Those are a bit more difficult.
Yeah, and I'm sure with the pandemic and how intense it was in Colombia, I think it was a 5 months lockdown, or fully lockdown.
Yeah.
I think it accelerates the rotation of the micro businesses. So the time to market for you was perfect, no, on that side.
That's true. The pandemic did help as in catalyst for change, and it's true that micro merchants, particularly in Colombia, suffered very, very much. And it also helped because many of the subsidies that the government was giving out, you needed to have a bank account. So also financial inclusion was increased significantly because of this.
Yeah, and now I think it's the time to talk about Treinta. So it's very difficult like to describe Treinta. I think when you search online, you see like you have been like the biggest seed, you have been the biggest Series A, of one of the biggest in town. When you see the number of users, it's quite impressive. My first question I have for you is what Treinta is doing today. I will say in 2022, September 2022. What is like Treinta today and what they are doing?
Okay, so Treinta, in summary, is a startup that has the objective to help micro businesses in Latin America thrive. Our main product is basically a super app that helps micro merchants in several pain points that they have because they are not digitized and because they are excluded from the financial system. Our main features are, number one, bookkeeping, which sits at our core, inventory management, but then they can also create an online store. They can keep track of the people that owe them money, a set of features that help them with their daily business management tasks. And now recently, we have launched our own POS terminal that allows them to receive card payments. We also are building a B2B marketplace where they can buy products to their wholesale distributors at a cheaper price. We also allow them via Treinta to sell top-ups, streaming services, and without an investment, gaining extra income. So in summary, it's like an ecosystem with a set of features that help them in many different ways.
What is super fascinating about Treinta, and I remember when I met 1 year ago, so you succeed to build an Android apps that you give for free to millions of merchants. And then when you capture the market, you are now building an ecosystem around that. Can you tell me more about the initial strategy and the first product that you gave and give to people?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first product was bookkeeping, very simple bookkeeping. It was basically a simple dashboard in which merchants can input sales and expense transactions, just like they did before in pen and paper. So that really, I think, was the key of Treinta initially, because if we focus on what they are already doing, and you tell a merchant, instead of typing this down instead of writing it down in a notebook, type it on a mobile app, that's easier to understand than if I go to you as a merchant and I tell you, adopt this wallet or adopt this online store, because that's overwhelming. So I think the key was making it very simple, making the transition simple. So the barrier to try it out is very, very low. And once they get used to that, it's much easier to introduce them to other features. And that remains the strategy. So the front page of the app is still a very simple dashboard to input.
And your bet was to start with a free product that you distribute to free to capture a big market share before monetization. That's right?
Exactly. That was our strategy since day one. And I think this is key. The type of users that we're after have a lot of financial pressure. In average, they earn as personal income around $500 per month. Many of them have to sustain other people other than themselves. So it's really not a lot. And we very early realized that if we wanted to monetize, it has to be because there is a direct and immediate impact on the amount of money that they have made. So this is with something that directly increases their revenue, decreases their costs, or gives them access to financial services. So this is the way that we're trying to monetize.
And now you made it. You acquire millions of users, but back in the time during lockdown, how did you raise money with the idea? Did you start to have the MVP to raise money? What was the first moment when you decided to raise money and to accelerate?
Well, we did a relatively small friends and family round, like $150,000 to start. It was really unnecessary because it took us a few months to get the money, because at that time, you couldn't even create a company in Colombia or in the US because everything was in lockdown. People were not working. But it took us not a lot of time and not a lot of money to launch an MVP. It was really one developer for less than a month to launch the first version of the app. So looking back, for any entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur that is hearing us, it really doesn't take a lot of money to launch the first version. And for me, after launching, it was very apparent that our MVP was super MVP, that there were a ton of things that weren't working. Everything took a ton to load, but having the product, speaking with people in the street, it was apparent that this was a need, that there had to be a way to make it work. And initially it was getting people on the streets. After a couple of weeks, we started to do some initial digital marketing, but just to make sure that we had an inflow of users to make sure that we could track.
It's a very good lesson, because most of the entrepreneurs don't believe that, but it's good to have people who raise a lot of money saying you don't need a lot of money to start and you can build an MVP in 1 month and be trained. It's a very good example on that. And how did you tell or convince your investors to say the stage one of the company is to give a product for free to million users? I cannot imagine the face of the VC back in the time. How did you convince them to believe in this stage and the strategy in the long term? You are selling a long-term vision for Treinta.
Yeah, I think it's not for everyone. So we definitely have certain VCs that like it more than others, and we have definitely been rejected by many VCs, especially in the Series A that we still weren't monetizing, because they wanted proof. Just because the deals that they typically invest in, they are used to analyzing revenue, net revenue retention, and all of those metrics. So it's not for everyone. And those that did invest, many had already invested in similar companies. So that was key. And I think laying out the strategy, people can understand, but what you cannot always make is that people feel comfortable with it.
So the second learning is to find investor who understand really your business vision and your business model.
Yeah.
And the second one, it's okay to get rejected from most of the VC because they are not the one who believe in you or understand you, right?
That's right. That's right. I think in the early stage, you should probably speak with everyone because you're learning how to pitch. Not everyone wants to speak with you. If you have even some moderate success in fundraising, after our first round, literally a lot of people wanted to speak to us, and it still happens. But if they have never invested in a similar company, if they have never invested in LATAM, but they are trying to do their first investment, etc., it's very unlikely. For a fact, I know that it's very unlikely that you will be the first in your category and your region. So you're much better off paying twice as much attention to those shorter group of people that you think it's more likely.
No, it's super insightful to come back about the growing. So as you mentioned, so after the MVP, and I don't know the time frame, but let's say 6 months, you acquire like a ton of businesses. I don't know what are the real numbers.
Yeah.
Like after 6 months, how many businesses were using Treinta?
So the first 4 months, it was really about finding product market fit. So we didn't have many users. And then after a 4-month mark, we joined Y Combinator. And in parallel, we tried to see that retention started to be good, engagement, we had organic recommendations, etc. And we started to invest heavily. I think in the 6th or 7th month mark, we had around 250,000 users, having grown over 100% in the past few months, or over 200%, like a crazy growth. And it was because we were spending in digital marketing, and it was very, very affordable.
Yeah, that's a learning about emerging markets, like social media work a lot from both like organic or paid acquisition strategy. Can you explain me a little bit more like what was the initial strategy? I know I think you are the first accounting software with 50,000 followers on Instagram. I never saw that. So can you tell me a little bit more about the initial strategy and still the strategy today to produce social media content from paid or organic?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that these micro businesses behave as B2B customers or B2C, depending what you do. In acquisition, it's definitely more B2C. When there is a purchasing decision, it's more B2B. So you need to mix the strategies. And something that we still get asked is, or some misconceptions that people have, is that you can only acquire this type of user on the streets because they are not digital, and that's not the case at all. Something shocking that I realized before starting Treinta is that you would go to a small store and the person would be with WhatsApp, with YouTube, with Facebook, behind the counter. Then you get there and they take out their notebook. So there was this paradox, but the people do use all of this social media. Almost everyone has smartphones now, etc., etc. So we just tried everything in terms of acquisition, and it turns out that acquiring those people with social media was the most efficient way. So we started to spend most of our effort in social media. We A/B tested for a while the right messages, and it became a point where it was quite cheap and very, very scalable.
And you did a lot of initiative, as you mentioned, in social media. What are like the difference? So there is a paid. What are the other also initiatives that you launched back in the time?
Well, we really tried everything. So paid media. We did content marketing, SEO, And one of the key things that we started to build since really the very beginning, and as of today, it's the #1 channel, which is completely organic. We started to prioritize in our backlog features that enabled virality. So features that put the app or the name of the app in front of other people beyond the user, even if initially the Treinta was just something that didn't involve other people other than the business owner. So we included the fact that users could share a digital business card via WhatsApp. They can also send payment reminders for people that owe them money. They can send transaction receipts once a customer buys something. When we created the online store, it is within our domain. Every time someone puts an order, and every single interaction where it involves another person, it includes a link to download Treinta. Even if they are not merchants, since there are so many merchants, some of them will be small merchants or will have family members or close friends or whatever that are small merchants. So that helped a lot with virality, and today we get more than 1,000 organic merchants every day.
No, it's very fascinating. Like you did like product-led growth, like really the perfect example in a target that was underserved. Or I think nobody imagined that you can build a product-led strategy on the micro businesses in Colombia. You finished the stage 1 of the product, getting millions of users around the mobile application. You just raised another round, as we say. What is your focus now as a company and as a founder at this stage of the company post Series A?
Sure. So now we are very fortunate that we have raised this large round. We have an incredible team, and we do have time to execute on our plan. Now, the way that I see our product is that we have a very good bookkeeping inventory management app that has helped a lot of people, that is completely free. And we have started to build add-ons, like we have this POS terminal, we have the B2B marketplace. It still feels like it's an add-on. On the next 1 or 2 years, we will make it feel much more as an ecosystem where everything is a flawless experience. You don't feel like it's different verticals, but it's part of the same thing. And that means, for example, that you can take the money that you have received via POS terminal and directly buy from the marketplace without having to do a separate transaction, which is how it exists as of today. And keeping to improve the product to make it an absolute no-brainer in a couple of years for any type of business, small business in LATAM to use Treinta. I think that the region is changing. In fintech, for example, up until recently, it was enough to be successful if you had a single product that had great customer experience. For example, a payments product or investing or lending. If you had competitive fees, if you had a product that was stable, if you had good customer experience, that was more than enough to beat the traditional players that are still lacking in all of those. Now with more fintechs and with more money in the region, I think that will not be enough. You need to have an ecosystem because it ends up being the better experience. I don't want to have 3 or 4 separate products for doing anything of that, for doing all of that. I want to have a one-stop shop in which I can do everything, and there are synergies, and it's just a better experience. So that's what we are trying to build.
So you mentioned SuperApp different times. This is
Yeah.
something I discovered when I moved to Colombia on the B2C side.
Yeah.
Can you explain this concept of SuperApp and other example you may have in mind? Because this is like a really unique opportunity that you see in Asia or in Latin America, but is not yet in Europe.
Exactly. Yeah, I think there are some cultural reasons. It's difficult to say, but when we started Treinta and analyzing different markets, in the US, people are much more willing to have like a ton of separate apps that do the same thing, while here everything tends to converge. Like in ride-hailing, in food delivery, the winner tends to have a larger part of the market share. And I don't know what it is. I have an hypothesis that is because phones here tend to have less capacity, so they are. It's harder for them to have a ton of options in their phone, and that may be one of the root causes. It also happens in Asia, where really it's the only place where super apps have been truly successful. We believe that it will also happen in Latin America, and I don't like really the term super app, although I do say it because I think of like a company like Rappi, which I absolutely love as a consumer and as a business because I use it every single day. But the way I see it is, you do have like a set of different services that are not as interconnected as I would see Treinta in the future. I see it more as an ecosystem where every single thing that you do impacts the rest. And for us, bookkeeping is at our core. If you buy something in the marketplace, it increases your inventory. It's an expense. If you get a payment, it's also it's a sale that you have done there. So everything is linked more as an ecosystem.
So you say the focus is now go outside of Colombia.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge to go from country around, because the difference between like the European market like is mainly the language different. Here like it's quite uniform. There is only the Brazil on the side.
Yeah.
What's the biggest challenge for you like to grow in terms of geolocalization? What did you imagine and what did you start to face?
So in terms of our core free product that is already available in several countries, the result has been relatively similar. There are some differences in cost of acquisition, slight differences in metrics, but generally speaking, needs are very similar. And Brazil maybe is the more unique one, just because digitization there in fintech and overall is much higher compared to the rest. The thing is, when we are starting to monetize, it starts being a bit less scalable. If we had to launch a POS terminal in another country, there's its own competitive dynamics, its own regulation. So it starts being a bit less scalable. So we need to pick our battles very well. We are going to probably start monetizing in Brazil or Mexico in the next couple of years before the next one, just because they are the most important markets in the region. But we're still in the process of defining what's the strategy there.
Another very fascinating stuff about Treinta. So you get accepted to Y Combinators. I think most of the people don't understand like the number of Colombian companies going to Y Combinators. There is quite a lot in terms of history and quite a lot successful company after Y Combinator. For you, Y Combinators, how did you get there? It was mainly because of the ideas, it was mainly because of the traction, it was mainly because of the vision. What would be like your recommendation of how you get to Y Combinator when you come from like an emerging country like Colombia?
I believe that there are three things that Y Combinator likes to see. In my opinion, the three most important things are, number one, team. They need to see people that have good backgrounds. They don't necessarily have to come from other startups. I came from McKinsey. My co-founder was also a consultant. Or it could be like prestigious jobs or have impressive backgrounds, because team is the single most important thing, obviously. Number two is demonstrating that you have executed very fast. So for us, we had been working in Treinta for just a couple months, but we already had a product in the market. We had hired a few people. We could pinpoint like a few things that we had done very fast. And number three, that you're addressing a very large market. I believe that those are the three key points. So if you can build a story around those 3 points, getting into Y Combinator should be achievable. I also thought that it was close to impossible. But it's true that we did hit those three things very well. And the process is really very simple. You submit an online application, they call you for an interview that lasts for 15 minutes. They ask relatively basic questions. What's going to be your business model? What's your competitive advantage? Why are you the right people to launch this? That you can prepare beforehand. And if it makes sense, you're in. and that's it.
And did you get help from other like Spanish or Colombian entrepreneurs for this process, or you made it alone?
I did get a few mock interviews from people that got accepted to Y Combinator before from LATAM. It's a very open community. If someone has an interview or if someone is preparing an application and they just ask a group of former YC founders, many of them will be willing to help. So you don't have to do it in a vacuum by yourself.
So they can contact you and do the mock interview with you if they take in advance.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you change in mind during YC? Because there is a lot of founders talking about it changed my mind, it completely changed the company. Did it was true for you, or your vision was still the same? And what was different, like the before and after YC on business side?
I think I sort of had some misconceptions about entrepreneurship. Most importantly, that I sort of believed deep inside that you need to figure out everything, while in reality, as of today, there are like best practices and playbooks to do much of the things that you will do as a founder. How to hire properly, how to do analytics, how to fundraise, how to whatever, how to do product development. There are like best practices, and YC I think has been a pioneer in putting those out there publicly. And it was completely different maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where you truly had to figure those things out by yourself. So it was about like getting best practices in every aspect of the company. And also for us particularly, it did help a lot with focus on the important. They did ingrain in our brains that the most important things that you need to do is pick what's the metric that is going to be the leading indicator for your next round, and do everything in the company to prioritize what most impacts that metric. And putting that mentality in the company was super important.
No, thanks a lot. And today, so you announced back in April, I think one of the biggest Series A in Latin America, $49 million, right? Something around.
Yeah.
The company is big, like the open space behind. You have people in different countries today. How do you keep the link with the community of users as the founders and as a company with these micro businesses?
I think that's one of the key things that we put a lot of emphasis on. We have a design team that is more than 20 people that just researches people, does research or UX analysis. And the whole company as a whole, we have a culture of being very close to our merchants. For example, last Friday, actually, so a couple of days ago, we did a sales Olympic where over 100 people in the company went out there and tried to sell POS terminals. And this was an opportunity to like learn about their pains, learn about the sales process, etc., etc. We sold almost 200 POS terminals as well, so it was also nice. So we do make a lot of proactive effort, and we try to make it as easy as possible. So we have people that their only job is scheduling interviews with merchants. So we make it easy for product managers, for UX designers, for everyone. We even at some point got to the extreme that we wanted to buy a small store and make people rotate to like be in the bones of a small merchant. We ended up not doing it. It turns out it's not that easy to execute, but it's very important, and it's very easy to think at some point that you know everything, but it's always good to remind of the pains that they have.
One of my final question for you is if you were not in tech and you were one of these micro owner, what will be your shop? Tell me about your shop and what it will be as a micro owner business.
I think after like obviously having spoken with many of them, those that I believe get more success and are also more happy are those that do something very unique, like handcrafts, they have a restaurant that have their own touch, or like they have their own clothing company where they personalize the clothes or whatever. Those that are different in a way to everything else are those that I see that the merchant is happier, and also it correlates with success. It's also a bit more risky. Obviously, it's easy to do a hardware store or mini supermarket because the market is there, but I would probably be on the riskier side.
Thanks a lot, Lluís, for all this aspect. It's been a real pleasure to spend this time with you, and I'm still very impressed by the company you build in the field of the heart of the Colombian economy.
Thanks, Jeremy. It has been a pleasure.